Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1753 today. Thank you so much for joining me for it. And today we're going to talk about the maker himself. We're going to talk about George Lucas, and we're going to talk about his participation in the creation of the story for episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So, after Star Wars Celebration Chicago happened last week? Yeah, I guess it ended a week ago today. My, where does the time fly? There had been interviews done not long after the episode 9 panel where J.J. Abrams talked about getting the story right, and they've talked a lot about this just overall. But one of the things that he revealed was that they had a meeting with George Lucas prior to writing the script for The Rise of Skywalker. And who that they is, I mean, JJ for sure, probably his co-writer Chris Terrio, and I'm sure a number of other folks as well. But the fact that they brought him in is, of course, remarkable just in general because of his involvement with the sequels and the history of this whole thing. Turning over a set of treatments and then having those treatments ostensibly ignored, even though there were still bits of information and inspiration that were taken from those treatments and actually influenced how the story unfolded both in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And, but then of course The Force Awakens coming out and George Lucas saying that, it's a movie that the fans would love, paraphrasing here, but that was the general gist, sort of a backhanded compliment basically, because at least it's nice to say, oh, the fans will love it, but, George was never really making it for the fans exactly. He was kind of making it for his own vision, and there's a lot to be said for that, of course, because, that's what geniuses do, right? That's the kind of thing that they're supposed to do, is follow a vision and implement it to the best of their ability, which is why we were all kind of invested with him in the first place. But anyway, so a little bit of a complicated history, but they brought him back in, and it is remarkable. Here's the thing, though. We can probably make a bigger deal about it than we actually should. And by we, I'm not necessarily saying you or me. I'm saying that there is a certain element of the world that would probably make a bigger deal about this. And I don't think we can, and I don't think they can, and I'll explain why. So basically where I'm going with this is, the idea that George Lucas was brought in could be used as a weapon against the whole Rian Johnson situation. Like, oh my gosh, Rian Johnson's movie did all this, that, and the other, and they had to bring in George Lucas to try and make things right. Well, it doesn't seem to actually be the case, and we have to refresh ourselves a little bit on something. So back in September of 2017, so this would have been 3 months before the release of The Last Jedi, Lucasfilm decided to part ways with Colin Trevorrow, who was at that time the director and co-writer of Episode 9. He was going to be co-writing it with his frequent writing partner, Derek Connolly, and at one point they had been working on it, and Lucasfilm decided, we need a little bit more involvement in this, and so Jack Thorne was brought in to do a pass on the screenplay. Jack Thorne is probably most famously known for being involved with the smash play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and so he was brought in, and that happened, I believe, and it was like August of 2017 or something like that. And it didn't take long for them to just decide that they had different visions about what the movie was supposed to be, and so they decided that they were going to part ways with Colin Trevorrow. What this has to do with George Lucas and Rian Johnson, I will explain to you right after the break. Stay tuned. Hey there. If you're enjoying all the coverage that I'm bringing you from Star Wars Celebration and what I do every single day for you at Star Wars 7x7, I hope you'll consider putting something in the tip jar at patreon.com/SW7x7. $1, $3.27, $5.01 or more. Honestly, every little bit helps, and every little bit is just as exciting as every other little bit. Please consider supporting me in the work of delivering Star Wars stories and interviews to you on a daily basis at patreon.com/SW7x7. Welcome back. So here's what this all has to do with George Lucas and Rian Johnson. In May of 2018, Colin Trevorrow gave an interview with Empire magazine, and he was, in good spirits about the whole situation, or at least certainly putting on that public face, which, good for him. That's what you're supposed to do. But he talked about how, awesome the experience was, and he specifically said that he got to tell his idea for a Star Wars story to George Lucas and to Luke Skywalker, aka Mark Hamill. And so what that simple line tells us right there is that George Lucas was already involved in the storytelling for Episode 9 prior to The Last Jedi coming out, prior to the departure of Colin Trevorrow from the project in the first place. Like, while he was working on this thing, he got to meet with George Lucas and discuss his story ideas. So Lucas being involved with Episode 9, finding this out at Star Wars Celebration Chicago, well, this isn't exactly news, because he's been involved or, had, some base touched for him since 2017. I mean, this has been going on for 2 years that they've been in touch with Lucas about this project, and well before The Last Jedi hit theaters. So that, I think is, on the one hand, an insanely brilliant idea for Lucasfilm to be going back to him to make sure that they close everything off the way that it needs to be done. And it's also not nearly as controversial an idea as it might seem on first blush. Or at least because of the fact that it happened so long ago, I don't think it can really be fodder for those kinds of discussions. And, the last thing would have to be that it means we've achieved some level of peace between George and the development of the sequel movies. Now, I know we could kind of arrive at that conclusion to some degree because George has checked in on other Star Wars movies like Rogue One and Solo, but, as far as the actual saga movies, well, his involvement has been, comparatively minimal aside from him turning over the ideas that he had and then, them being taken and run with by other folks in directions that he entirely did not anticipate or, would have desired to do. But the fact that he is now, having conversations, or at least had conversations with J.J. Abrams, who was, the prime person who was doing something entirely different with his movies, and that's what is happening in the development of The Rise of Skywalker. Well, I think that can be only good news for everyone involved. At least I would like to think so. Especially when you consider that the, generally speaking, most highly regarded movie in the Skywalker saga is The Empire Strikes Back, where he had, limited involvement, and it was mostly a raft of other creatives that were actually making the project happen finally. Not to say that he didn't have involvement on a regular basis throughout the production of Empire Strikes Back, but I think you get where I'm going with this. Like, having George Lucas involved and having other creative people execute the vision, well, that tends to be a fantastic recipe for Star Wars success. So that right there, my friends, is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it. If you're not subscribing to the show, remember you can subscribe for free, by the way, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, just liking the page on Facebook or subscribing for free to the channel on YouTube. Or if you listen to podcasts, you're getting the audio version, remember you can subscribe for free on your favorite app, whether it's the iTunes app, or Spotify, or Stitcher, Overcast, you name it. It's free wherever you want to get it. I just hope that you'll consider putting something in the tip jar at patreon.com/SW7X7 as well. And so, yeah, like I said, that'll do it. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.